Good afternoon, friends. My name is Phil Keeling. I am a writer, part time game designer, and welcome to Meet Your Makers, the show where we talk to the writers, artists, developers, designers, and just incredibly talented squirrels that make the games that we love happen. Today, I have with me the very prolific, talented, beautiful. May I call you beautiful?
You
Uh,
may. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolute good, good. We're off to a good start then. Travis Legge, welcome to Meet Your Makers.
Thank you very much for having me. It is a honor and a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite.
That's terrific. I was so happy to have you here. I've been meaning to. The first thing to do is where. Oh no, why are we going? Everything shifted.
Everything blew up.
Everything blew up. Everything blew up.
Tech happens, we say on the chat.
Yeah,
Um,
it did. Let me see. Oh, I know what I think. No, no, that's not true. I did that. Oh, I know what happened. Never mind. That's it. There we go. I was fiddling around too much. That's my main issue, messing around with stuff. Okay, so
I see.
let's
I'm
start.
told. I'm told your audio is quieter than mine, which stands to reason. I am kind of a loudmouth. So
Okay, I can fix that. Well, that's good to know, though. That's good to know for
yeah,
for you.
thank you.
For you, I mean.
That too. Yes. Thank you. Thank you in the chat for letting us know when we have audio kerfuffles. Speaking up when you hear that sort of thing helps immensely.
We really do appreciate it. That's very helpful. Okay, well let's start from the beginning. Travis, where would people know you from? What are some recent projects perhaps that you've been working on?
So most recently, in terms of releases, I worked on um, Icons of Rage for Werewolf, the Apocalypse 20th Anniversary Edition. It was very cool having the opportunity to do that. That was the last Werewolf 20 book, and I got to squeeze in my player character, her stats into that book from like my first Werewolf game. So that was a big self-congratulatory nerd moment. I've also worked on The World Below, done a bunch of stuff for Scarred Lands. I've worked on Realms of Pugmire a bit and on Pugmire First Edition. I've worked done a bunch of stuff on Trinity, particularly uh, on Aberrant, but I've worked on pretty much every era of Trinity um, except for Anima. I haven't done anything for Anima. So yeah, I've done a whole bunch of stuff. Plus, I also run my own publishing company called Aegis Studios, and our most recent release has been Odysseys and Overlords, which is a uh, fantasy setting using the Savage Worlds engine. So
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Um,
yeah,
so I like to start from the beginning with these ones, especially when it comes to designers, because this is such. I was talking to my brother about this recently. That this is such. This was already a niche hobby. This was already pretty niche. But we live, fortunately, in a world where you don't need something to be mainstream for it to be recognized, for it to be um, valid, and for you to be able to have a lot of fun with it and that sort of thing, and have it be widespread. And obviously, a lot of people talk about the golden age of the tabletop role playing game and what have you, but back in the day when folks like you and me were first starting to get into this sort of thing, it was a little less, let's say, accessible,
sure.
perhaps. So where did you get started? How did you what were your guys? What were the games that got you into this?
So I grew up in a little bitty town called Mauston, Wisconsin. It's I tell people it's got 3,000 people and 5,000 cows. Now that ratio may have changed since I lived there, but it's a tiny little farm town in Wisconsin. But my older brother was very big into D&D. There was a kid who lived across the tracks from us where we grew up. I had like a set of actual like train tracks that just ran through my backyard. There was no like fencing or warning. It was just grass and then train tracks. So that's the kind of environment I was raised in. Places where the kids could just go play in front of a train. But anyway,
Those were the
across the
days.
yeah, across the way from that was this kid Matt Stewart, who was a huge D&D fan. Used to go to Gen Con all the time, yada yada yada. Back when I was in Lake Geneva and whatnot. And so he got my brother into D&D. My brother got me into D&D. I was probably 4, maybe 5 the first time I ever played. First time I ever played D&D. And so I got way into that for a very long time, and then I eventually, I think the next game that I picked up, I was probably, I don't know, I'd have to check like the timing, but I was probably 10 or 11. And I got a copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness by Palladium Books, which I loved. I was a huge Ninja Turtles nerd. Um, and so that kind of like showed me that, oh, this hobby can represent anything. Um, and then, the year that changed many lives in my generation, 1991 rolled around, and the 1-2 punch of, Nirvana releasing Nevermind and Vampire the Masquerade coming out within that year really altered the course of my life. um,
That is a 1-2 punch if ever I
yeah,
heard
it was
one.
a weird, it was a weird change. It was a strange time to live because it was so very like, you look at Vampire the Masquerade right now, and it's easy to sort of brush it off as something that's, established and storied and one of the giants and been around and nothing new under that particular sun. But at the time when it came out, it was transformative. And then, right around that time, I also got into Rifts, which was also, um, in terms of like establishing a setting and creating a world that was different than a sword and sorcery world. Like Rifts was mind blowing, especially to a kid at that age. So those were really the games that really inspired me to want to become a creator. And somewhere on a floppy disk, somewhere I have a copy of the first submission I ever sent to White Wolf when I was 15 or 16. That I don't even think I got a rejection letter from, if I recall properly. But
It didn't even. It's like, okay, yeah, just put that in the corner over there.
right. But yeah, it was so I spent a lot of my teenage years and my 20s mostly just kind of running games, for my own, for myself, my friends, so on and so forth. I never really thought about monetizing it much until the open game license came out. And when that happened, a couple buddies of mine were like, well, we have this idea for like a urban fantasy setting. It was sort of like dark urban fantasy, modern horror type thing. Um, and since the OGL is there, let's use the D&D rules for it. And so we developed our setting called Contagion, and that was the first thing I ever published. And we were, I think, like the 80th publisher that signed up at RPG Now. Like it was way early in the game. And I remember my business partner at the time, Darius McCaskey, um, was like, "We got to get into this PDF production, man. This is the way it's going to go." I was like, "You're fucking stupid, man. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to ever. It's not going that direction. Are you kidding me?" Well, he was right, and I listened to him, and thank goodness I did. So yeah, we got heavily into PDF publishing, and that was what I did for a long, long time. I at one point, Aegis Studios kind of went on the back burner. My partners sort of opted out. I bought them out because they were, doing families. They were starting their families. Meanwhile, by this time, I was a teenage parent, so my kids were already like in, middle school by this point. Um, so I was like, all right, I'll buy you out and I'll keep it going. But then I kind of took a sidetrack into feature film production. Making micro budget films, which I did for about 10 years. I didn't do a whole lot of game publishing in that time. But when it came time to the thing that really, I guess, sort of the sort of combination of events that brought me back into doing this and into doing this full time was the creation of the Dungeon Masters Guild, which allowed me to make D&D 5th stuff and profit off of it directly using like some of their marketing, which was nice. And that kind of took off right around the same time that I got really, really, really sick of working in film. so I
Lasted longer than I did, my friend. Lord.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how many people in this realm also have some film background.
Oof.
We're just a bunch of frustrated filmmakers.
I mean, isn't that really what it is? They used to call it theater of the mind, but really we're all making our own short films here. I think that's really how it goes.
Pretty much. Yeah. And so I was able to transition relatively smoothly into doing this full time. And then as I started doing work with Onyx Path, they liked what I did. I liked working with them. Started doing more and more work. Sort of recognized an opportunity with the Twitch channel to get some more eyes on our stuff and hopefully create kind of a library of content that would be evergreen, so that people who are in their friendly local game store 4 or 5 years from now and they come across a copy of you know Trinity Continuum or Deviant the Renegades or anything that we have published on their shelf, and they're like, oh, this game looks neat, and they go to look it up online, they'll be able to see these actual plays of the game, and they'll always be there. So there's always material for new players to come into the fold um,
Absolutely.
through that. So that was kind of like my pitch for how to tackle the Twitch channel, and it seems to have worked out so well. We're just, I think Ian and I are the oldest subs on the channel. I think we just both celebrated our 52-month streak of subscribing. So it's been around for a while. Time is weird. Time is bizarre.
It is, yeah. It is that. It is very that. In answer to your question in the chat, awkward Jim, you never got a rejection letter, so it means they liked it, right? Yes, I think that's the origin of many a. I sent you this unsolicited script, and you made a movie that had a character who had the same name as mine, and you obviously owe me royalties. Uh,
Right.
that is how that all works.
Yeah. Sometimes the litigious nature of our society is quite amusing to me.
It's something to watch. It's entertaining, at least. We've all got our own individual fiddles to play as it all burns. That's the advantage of the modern age.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a fiddle. You get a fiddle, and you get a fiddle. It's great.
The democratization of fiddles. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. everyone's fiddling. So, what was the first project you worked on? Because you're one of the first people on the show that it was a very much self-made, self-starter within all of this and coming together with Onyx Path later on after you'd already established yourself. Was there any project in particular that you put out? Because the thing I've noticed that I think is really valuable about something like Onyx Path is how accessible it is, not just in the sense of PDFs and the internet and all that stuff, but the creators. People are, it's not. We're none of us Gary Gygax over here. It's like everyone is accessible and pretty. Everyone seems to have their head, in fact, very tightly squeezed on for the
Sure.
most part. And so if you have a question, I can remember the first few times that I reached out to, different, creators on the site formerly known as Twitter, for example.
Sure.
And I was like, holy shit, they're talking to me. They're answering my question. That's freaking cool. And I think that's a good thing. I do think that's a good thing. But was there a moment in your own, um, coming up basically that made you go, "Holy shit, I'm making it. I'm doing it." I'm.
I mean, it's weird. I'm in a position that I recognize is relatively unusual, but I still, I guess, have a hard time clocking it as being something fantastical, which is that I have multiple times in my life had a dream come true. I have decided one day I was going to go make movies, and then I went and I made the movies, and it happened. I had a sold out screening for my first film with a line around the block that I hadn't seen that type of thing since Star Wars came out.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that type of a moment, right? That was super cool. The movie didn't do anything after that, but I had one good screening. That was nice. So there have been a number of moments where I'm like, this is really neat. I don't know that I've ever had a moment that was like, I have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm so uh, geared toward, because of, I think, living a freelance lifestyle for, over a decade now, probably getting closer to two. Um, I'm so used to like always thinking about what's next that I sometimes have a hard time enjoying what's happening right now. Um,
You're not the
I,
only freelancer to tell me that. That's a big surprise. Not a lot of freelancers sit and enjoy the fruits of their labor for terribly long before it's like, okay, when's my next deadline?
right. And that's something I'm actively trying, like I'm making an active effort to do more of. I'm making an active effort when I get a copy of a book I worked on in the mail. I'm trying to set aside some time to open it and flip through it and enjoy that that's there and look lovingly at my little name in the credits and whatnot. Um, and I haven't always done that. There are certain books that have always been, I guess, like a slightly greater excitement, or have a slightly stronger personal connection to. Those are nice, moments. Particularly, M20 Sorcerer was a big one for me,
Mm.
because that is like there are a lot of there are a lot of game lines that I've been like, I would like to work on this game line. I would like to do this thing, yada yada yada. But Sorcerer was a book that I can distinctly remember, like picking up, at my friendly local game store, going down to the Denny's where we used to have our mage game, sitting down, cracking it open, and telling my friends, like, I love everything in this book, but if I could do my own, I would do X, Y, and Z. And then getting to do that book 20 years later. That was weird. It was super cool, but it was weird. But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to pick it to point at a moment and say, I've arrived, because you're
Right.
always kind of in the process of arriving, if
Well,
that makes sense.
no, I think that makes perfect sense, especially within the context of a freelancing kind of lifestyle where, yeah, it's not one big payoff. It's buzzing from one flower to another. But that actually brings up another thing I've thought about often when it comes to this sort of thing. Do you find how's your balance in terms of work and play? Because you've made your hobby your work, and that's obviously something people talk about a lot nowadays with creator culture and that sort of thing. Do you what percentage of games are you playing these days where you're just playing it and you're not trying to monetize it really?
I don't have any games right now that I'm not monetizing in some form or other. Wish I did, but and that's really a matter of time more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Just it. I started running games on Start Playing, so that has also kind of cut into like the would I be doing something with my buddies instead type of thing. However, a lot of my old gaming crew is either scattered to the four winds or no longer in the hobby. So realistically, I don't think I'm losing anything.
And
You
there
know,
are worse ways to make a buck too. So
there are, and if I run things at even if I run things at like a home table, I make things for that table that then will wind up being published. But it's been the last time I had like a home table was, well, I guess up until about Thanksgiving, I was playing in a biweekly um, Exalted Essence game at a buddy of mine's house, but some circumstances changed and that's not happening anymore. So that was fun. It was nice. But like I said, anything that I do, um, ultimately I will wind up finding a way to work it into a release or something like that. Um, Part of the reason I chose Essence was because I'm a fan of Exalted, but I'm not like a fan of Exalted. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like deep into that lore,
mm-hmm.
and that's why you'll probably never see me run an Exalted stream,
Yeah.
because that's a game where the people who are into the lore are very into the lore, and I wouldn't want to misrepresent that or not do a good job with it. And Exalted's a super lore dense game. Yeah.
Yeah, those yeah, there are certain games where you can squeeze in a little more irreverence, a little you can mix it up a little bit. You're flexible to move, and then there are other ones where the fans are like, I'm not I'm not pissing them off. I'm not even taking
Right.
that chance.
This is right. This is the established lore, and when you I mean, and who knows? I could be being overly cautious about that. I probably am being overly cautious about that, but I would rather dedicate that screen time to someone who really knows what they're doing with it.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why I tend to focus the games that I run specifically on more on Trinity, Dystopia Rising, Scarred Lands, stuff like that. So.
Do you find that you're a forever DM or anything like? Do you have any games that you just
Not so much now. I've been very fortunate. I've been invited to participate in games over at Dork Tales a couple times. I've for a while I was in a regular Star Trek Adventures game over there, which was a hoot. I just had to step away because of increasing responsibilities I have for Onyx Path, and it was just the timing wasn't good for it. But I get to show up and play in one shots that other people run and stuff. Some of the games like I'm not nearly as up on Scion as I am on Trinity, for example. So like sometimes I'll get somebody else to run Scion, and I'll be doing tech on the stream, but I'll also get to sit in as a player.
Mhm.
Um, I try to fill as much of my schedule. I do one of the things that I do for Onyx Path is I'm one of the coordinators for the Onyx Path convention. And I try to buy myself a couple of opportunities during the con to play games I wouldn't normally get to play.
Yeah,
That's a fun thing to be able to do. So yeah, I'm not nearly the forever DM that I was, though. Most of the time, I am still running
I
games.
think for what you're describing is pretty miraculous for most of the writers and designers I've talked to. It seems to be like this cluster of people who are like, if I'm gonna play a game, I better run it. That sort of thing.
No, I love checking out other people's visions, and I love facilitating other people to sort of um, have the spotlight. I spend a lot of time on this channel running games, and I don't like being on camera. I don't like being the center of attention a whole lot. I used to enjoy it a lot more when I was younger,
I
but I've
think we
gotten
all did
old.
when we were
Yeah,
younger.
right. I've gotten old and crotchety, and I don't have as much fun with that
Right.
aspect of it anymore. But so my trick for getting around that is I just cast well when I'm doing my actual plays, so I know that I'm dealing with people that I'm very comfortable with. I'm dealing with people that are going to fill up the room.
Mm.
I'm dealing with people that aren't going to make me be the only person that's talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, so that helps.
that's good. Well, and you're doing beautifully today, so that's working out
Thank you.
nicely.
I appreciate that.
Now, you touched on something here that I think is a really interesting thing to uh, work out a little more. The idea of games. I think there's a lot of pressure when you're a freelancer or just interested in games to know as much about all of them as possible, and there are just so many of them. And I'm as guilty of buying books that I probably will never read just because of like, oh, I really should learn how to play this game, and I never do. Are there any blind spots in particular that you like? If someone said, I'm going to run, a one shot of this or a 5 session, campaign of this or something like that, that you would just jump at any that have been kind of tickling in the back of your mind of like, I really want to play this game.
Oh, geez. So many. I have. I guess I've been somewhat spoiled in that, especially in terms of Onyx Path games. Anything that I really want to play, I just arrange an actual play and
Yeah,
make it happen.
you got the opportunity.
Like the World Below, I was super jazzed to play the World
I
Below,
can't
and
wait to play the world below. That looks fun.
yeah, I got to play in a couple of the crowdfunder actual plays that we did, which was super cool. And now I'm going to be running a World Below actual play that's going to be starting a week from Thursday.
Nice.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. I get to play around in the setting a little bit more. I wanted to play it a couple times because I worked on that book, but I worked on a very sort of siloed off section of that book. Not that I didn't coordinate with the other people, because one of the things that Matthew is extremely talented at as a developer. Um, and I mean, I don't even necessarily want to say talented because I don't want to diminish the skill that this takes.
I was just going
So
to
this
say
is a
there's
skill that,
talents and skills.
yeah, this is a skill that Matthew has. The ability to sort of weave together disparate visions and make a cohesive whole out of them. He's one of the best developers that I've ever worked with or encountered in that regard. And the way to like kind of pull different people's stuff together and weave it into a way that everything works without necessarily having to have everybody have every piece of information for that to move forward. Which was super cool. Now I have since, and during the process, I made myself as familiar as I could with things. But some of these things, you're writing simultaneously, right? So when you're creating a whole new setting out of whole cloth, and you have multiple authors, you're never going to know exactly what's going on with everybody else's pieces, and that's Matthew's job to sort of track that. And he did a fantastic job with it on The World Below, as he always does.
So much of it is like delegation, project management, stuff like that.
Right. And just making sure and unifying the voice, making sure that everything ultimately works together. And there are some places where that, the method for that, and this is something I've employed as a developer too, is to say, well, you two authors are working on this section, and you two can go hash it out and come to me and tell me what you think your pitch for the idea is. And if you can't settle on one, each of you come up with one, and then I'll decide, kind of thing, which is very cool. And it came in handy. There were a couple of places, and I think it makes better products for it, because when you get writers who are passionate about what they're building, and I'm sorry about my lighting situation. I'm looking like Kurtz and
the horror.
Yeah, it's just the sun is conspiring to give me a very Brando-esque lighting. But there were some sequences just like working on The World Below. As I was working on some of the sorceries, Michaela and I had to wrestle a bit about how are these going to play with the antagonist rules, because we wanted to be able to do all this cool stuff, but we also want to one punch these powerful antagonists, yada yada. So figuring out those power balances and stuff, having the two authors that were super passionate about their vision, plus the developer who was super tuned into what the overall vision needed to be, I think that creates a positive struggle where the best material rises to the top. So that was kind of cool, because at the end of the day, everybody working on it wants the best book possible, right? So you learn to kind of follow your gut and stick up for your vision, but also to know when to say, okay, that doesn't maybe fit into the bigger puzzle the way that I thought it did. So that was kind of a cool experience to be able to do that. And it's kind of like how it always is working with Matthew. It's very, very collaborative and very cool, but also Matthew has the skill, the talent, the whatever you want to call it, to be able to refine that voice into what that voice should be, and that's super cool.
Now, when you've done that kind of work, because you've had projects that you've had to delegate different roles and responsibilities to different people, especially when it's something that is your baby, it's your trip, and how do you decide what needs to be sent out to other people, and how can you, I guess it's a matter. There has to be a matter of letting go of certain levels of control and make it more collaborative, which I think for a lot of writers like me, who are more used to the idea of I'm writing a novel, this is mine.
Right, sure.
How do you go about that? Is there a trick to it, or?
I think the big one, if you're speaking specifically in a development position, I think the big one is to make sure that if you want something on the page, that it winds up in the outline.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a carryover piece of advice that I picked up from writing comics. I've done a little bit of comics book writing. I've always wanted to write more comics, just haven't, for whatever reason, I haven't done more. I've self-published a couple
Only
of them,
so
but
many hours in the day.
that's probably the one. Yeah, and so in writing comics, one of the first things I learned is when you're doing your panel descriptions, if you expect something to show up on that page, it has to be in your panel description, right? And that's kind of just carry that logic over to outlining when I'm making an outline for a role-playing book or for anything. If you want something to be there, you have to call it out. If you don't want something to be there, you have to call it out. And where the fun comes in the collaborative process is people will inevitably come up with 100 things you didn't think about that were on either of those lists.
Mm-hmm.
and now you get to go through and parse like, okay, like this is cool and additive, this is cool but doesn't add anything to the party, so do we want to include it? This is great but it absolutely contradicts what we want to do, or maybe, and on occasion this part's just silly and nonsensical and awful and doesn't fit, so we lose that, and that's where a lot of that work is done in the redlining process, where you're going through after the writers do their first drafts. You go through, you say, hey, this bit works, this bit doesn't work. This is where I need you to change X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. I cheat a lot as a developer in the sense that I hire well. That is
That
the
helps.
it's the best. It's the same thing. Again, to tie it back into making movies, it's the same thing when you're making a film. You cast appropriately. If you cast a movie well, you've done 90% of the work.
Hmm.
Cast your
Absolutely.
movie well and hire a good sound person. You'll make a good product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It
Absolutely.
doesn't matter. Same thing with developing a role playing game book. If you cast well, if you hire well, um, your 90% of the work is done for you. I talk about a lot when I did Lore of the Traditions for M20. All I really did was hire people that I knew would do a very good job with the material, and that I knew would take the material personally, and that I knew would treat the material with the respect it required, both in terms of the legacy of Mage, but also, more importantly, in terms of where that legacy interacts with the real world and with real world cultures and such. And then once I had those people hired, I shut up and got out of their way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And it worked out pretty well. So.
I think that's something I keep running into, and you mentioned it before, the idea of how so many people in this industry also have film backgrounds, and I think the collaborative process, it really lends itself to that, and I think about um, mostly in the film industry, where you hear of directors, for example, who are the auteur, very, my vision and very strict and that kind of thing. And if you've been on a film set, especially for something that has a little money behind it, you go, how is it that you're not? It's easier to give up a little of that control, especially if you've
Sure.
got the right people underneath you and just trusting them. So
Well, and I mean, how you do it is, I'm going to go on a brief tirade
hit me.
about auteurs. So there are auteur filmmakers who I absolutely love, but I also think, for the most part, are getting to would be able to give me a result that I would not be able to tell the difference between if they would just cool their damn jets a little bit
Yeah.
and just make a movie like a normal person. I'm looking at you, David Fincher. Holy shit.
Yes.
I mean, like, because that's what you wind up with, right? If you're trying to be, um, and to tie it back into role playing, if I'm trying to be David Fincher, if I'm trying to make sure that every one of these things is perfect, and we'll do 87 takes if that's what it takes for me to not have a single pixel of this frame that's wrong, why would I be hiring anybody to do it? Right. You're at this point, you're really just kind of, now I understand why Fincher hires folks. He needs to. He can't just go out and act all those roles.
Right. Yeah. He
but,
literally has agents. Yeah.
but if I figure if I'm inviting you to this party to create stuff, then I should let you create. I think it's a little exclusionary to not. I think it's a little exclusionary to say, this is all well and good, but I want you to write what this specific thing. Now, I'm not saying ignore the brief. I'm not saying like the outline's not important. Of course, that stuff is important, right? But I do not feel the need to micromanage the people I hire, and that's partially because I'm careful about who I hire.
Yeah.
You know, um, yeah,
It's funny how the stereotype of the young slash amateurish player and game master, it kind of goes into the it's a similar vibe to uh, what would and wouldn't work in the development of the game itself. Like if you've got a DM who railroads you too much towards the conclusion that they want specifically, or a player who turns every moment to something about themselves, and it's you're not going to have a fun time. You're not going to have a good finished product. It's all about that collaboration.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's something that people do need to keep in mind when they're working on books. And fortunately, it seems to be a good a solid bedrock of the creative culture with Onyx Path. Um, is sort of that acknowledgement that this is a collaborative hobby. This is a thing where everybody is supposed to be able to get their input in, and everybody's supposed to get the ride that they want out of it. And emphasizing that in every aspect of creation. Trying to whether that be trying to make sure that the material is more representative of the diversity of life, or whether that be trying to make sure that when you're telling, that you're writing a scenario, that it's not a railroad. Whether that be when we're talking about different factions and different character types, trying to make sure that we've got something in there for kind of everyone, right? Um, so I think that that's baked into the creative culture, that in such a way that it makes those things um, easier, and it primes the developers and the writers for success. And so I think if you're like, going out on this on your own, or for example, if you're doing collaborative work, there's the Story Path Nexus Game Jam is going on right now.
Yeah.
um, where people can go and they can get together, and they can either do it by themselves, they can work in groups, and they can put out a product on the Story Path Nexus before February 28th. Um, and then it gets judged, and there's prizes for the winners and whatnot. But you also can put this out to sell. And I think my advice to folks that were looking at doing that is keep that stuff in mind. Like, if you're going to collaborate with folks, make sure that those folks all have their voice heard in that collaboration, because you will get stronger material from it.
Absolutely. And if people, if you find that you have to repeat yourself, with the your needs and wants, about, because no one's saying that you shouldn't develop the game that you want to develop.
Right.
But if people aren't getting it, then your communication skills might be the issue. If you're not,
Sure.
yeah, if you're not, like you said, if you're not outlining it, if you're not very clear, this is what we want here, this is on brand, this isn't, you're going to run into it a lot.
Absolutely. And I studied mass communication in college. That was my focus. And if there's anything I learned from that, it's that it's very easy for communication noise to interrupt understanding, and when it does so on a project at the organizational level, it's a problem. So you really have to work on kind of clearly communicating what the expectations are, and what you want out of the final product. And if you're leaving an area open, my other piece of, I guess, advice, if you're doing coordination stuff, is if you're leaving an area open for your creators to, paint whatever they want on that little piece of canvas,
Mm-hmm.
then leave it open for them.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't step in and poo poo every idea they have. You've left that space open for a reason.
yeah. Let them do it or
Um,
don't. That's all there is
right,
to it.
right.
Now, all right, let's take a little step back. This is one of the questions I like to ask, especially because everyone who's been on the show so far has been a writer and or developer, and the answers I've gotten have been always been very interesting. What were some of the modules, pre-made games, adventures, and that sort of thing that inspired you the most? Now, I say this is a weird question because I'm asking writers, and so I've had plenty of the writers say, I didn't use modules. I always wrote my own adventures and stories and that sort of
Oh, I am far too lazy to make that claim. Yeah, yeah. No, I use modules all the time. It's a lot of fun. Now, the part of the fun of it is, how do I cover this skeleton that the module has supplied with my own meat, right?
thing. Right.
That's where I find the most enjoyment. I think modules are a great tool. Even if you're a writer, if nothing else, they're a great time saver.
Oh yeah, give
Um,
yourself a little break.
right, exactly. Some of the best modules I've run, these are, I guess, to call them a module is a bit of a strong term, but I really enjoyed the mission reports that were included in the Orpheus books.
Okay.
Um, so much so that I actually went through and did some stuff for Storyteller's Vault that added in like game traits where they weren't where they're missing or expanded on those mission reports because I think they're very good skeletons.
Mhm.
I absolutely adore all of the modules that are included in the in media res for Trinity Continuum Core. That's a really really good collection of adventures. Going back to like childhood, I mean, Keep on the Borderlands obviously was one that I loved running. I there was a I can't remember what the name of the book was, but there was a book that I think had like three adventures for TMNT that I ran. I've run a lot of stuff out of like again when I was doing riff stuff, they had like the Chi Town books. I
Mhm.
would use those a lot, and sometimes too, like I might not run like straight through a module, but I might say, oh, I'm going to pilfer, these 10 NPCs in this location, and then I'm going to do my own jam with it or whatever. Um, so yeah, I mean, I leaned on modules a lot, still do. In fact, matter of fact, right now I'm running Skyland's Sins of Shelzar um, bi-weekly on every first, third, and fifth Wednesday.
Mhm.
That's a little bit confusing to say bi-weekly; it's not accurate. But right now they're going through effectively it's the Tomb of Horrors. I've just reskinned it a little bit so that it's
Nice.
Skylands. But that's one of the benefits of Skylands is that you can pull in all this fifth edition material because it's
Mhm.
all OGL, and you want to grab elements from a module that is out there and is printed. You want to reskin it. It's easy to do. So that's kind of what we're running through right now. Yeah. So
Is there a franchise out there that you talked briefly about getting to write for systems like Mage, for example, where you're like, holy crap, this is a dream come true. This is something I've always wanted to. This is something I used to play and that sort of thing. Are there any franchises out there that you haven't worked on yet that you know you'd kill to give a shot?
From a game perspective, I mean, I would love to. It'd be fun to work on something official for D&D.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, it would be
In
very fun.
theory, yeah.
Uh, I am. I have a couple things in the works for a couple properties I can't talk about yet that
Mm-hmm.
are very exciting. Um, I would love a chance to work on um, anything Marvel or DC related. That would be very cool. The one like I've often I've said earlier in the stream, and I've often said to my friends, like I don't have very many bucket list things left. Like I got to work on Mage, that was a big one for me.
Yeah.
I've gotten to work on Trinity Continuum Adventure. That was my favorite game for a very 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 long time. I was like, that is a perfect role playing game.
Mm-hmm.
I just really loved it. So when the opportunity to work on second edition came around, I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. But I desperately would like to write an issue of Spider-Man before I shuffle loose the Mortal Coil. That's the big one that
Oh,
I
that'd
would
be.
love to do.
Oh, yeah. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even want to write like a complicated one. I just want to write Pete swinging through,
Yeah.
New York, getting ready to grab some, groceries for Aunt May, and then he sees like Paste Pot Pete doing a heist. He's like, "Oh crap, I got to go fight this dude with glue guns," and like that's it. That's all I want. Marvel, make it happen.
I don't. I don't think that's too much to ask,
I
Travis.
don't either.
I
Yeah.
think. I think if they don't, because I know Marvel's watching right now.
They should
I
absolutely, yeah.
know
Call
some.
me.
They've got their spies everywhere, and if they don't, they're just being jerks about it. They're
They're
just being
just being jerks,
selfish.
and they're leaving money on the table. Like
Yeah,
it's a
it's a
core Spider-Man concept.
it's so easy for them to make some cash in this way. Marvel, if you're listening, call us.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
now, let's say we've talked about games that you're not monetizing and everything like that. What if you had a day where someone like basically let's say it's your birthday and the powers that
Sure.
be come together and say, you know what, you've been such a good boy, Travis, let's we're going to put together uh, a one shot of any game you want. You can tie one on, just sit down, relax, and just be totally yourself. There's no pressure, there's no stress involved. What game is that?
They came from the Cyclops' cave. There's,
Nice.
yeah, there's. I don't even have to stop and think about that. Like, it is currently, and I say this fully acknowledging I love the world below. I'm really excited about the world below.
Yeah.
But as of this moment in my life, this stage in my life, they came from the Cyclops' Cave is probably my favorite role playing game.
That's
And that
awesome.
may be in part because I had nothing to do with writing it.
That doesn't
You know,
hurt, does it? That doesn't
yeah,
hurt.
it's nice to have that little bit of removal. Like this isn't really work, right? But it's also just the game that they came from line in and of itself is just brilliant
Yeah.
and a ton of fun. And I've gotten to work on a lot of stuff for Beneath the Sea. But I didn't work on Cyclops' Cave, but that is the vibe that I dig the most, and it's a specific, and I think you'll see this on the actual play I'm running. Um, there's a specific swath of the broader thing that Cyclops' Cave encompasses that I'm really really into, which would be basically your He-Man, She-Ra type sword and sorcery, and like
Yes.
your Hercules and Xena type live action. So taking those elements, mixing them in a pot, and making them into a game, that is 100% like me. So that would be the game I would choose. Would be they came from the Cyclops' Cave. My second choice, if for some reason we couldn't run that, would be Dark Sun.
Oh yes! Oh hell yes! A man after my own heart. I love it. That's my favorite campaign setting for D&D.
it,
I love it.
it's pretty cool.
Really cool.
There's a lot about it I love. And there's a lot of material in Dark Sun. You hear a lot of people right nowadays talking about how like the wizards could never they could never do a new Dark Sun. Yada,
Oh,
yada.
come on.
And I don't believe that's true.
I don't agree.
I think that if you make villains villainous and you make heroes heroic, you can tell a whole lot of stories.
Absolutely.
You just have to make sure you're pointing out, you know, this isn't good. We're not endorsing
No, I think
that.
that's what it is. There's so many things out there that are sensitive, admittedly sensitive topics, understandably sensitive topics, um, that you want to be careful with, and it just takes a little extra effort. That's all it takes. It's not necessarily something you have to give up on. You just have to consciously work your way through it. And it's a shame when you hear developers who shall not be named basically say, "Yeah, we're not going to do that because it just wouldn't work." The hell, it wouldn't. It absolutely
Yeah.
would if you just tried. If you just, but they don't. Anyway, that's my
Well,
little tangent.
it's not even just try. It's you bring people in that have a lived experience
Yes.
that can handle those topics in the sensitive manner that they require.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's no shortage of sensitive topics in Scarred Lands. But
Absolutely.
again, going back to what I said earlier, when I was working on Dead Man's Rust, Youngman's Guide to Gelsped, Vigil Watch, my mantra was hire well. If I
Hmm.
want to talk about a sensitive topic, I'm going to hire people who have the life experience to talk about that topic.
Get a variety. Get yeah.
Right.
Get people who know things that you don't know. Don't just staff your team with a bunch of. Oh Lord, the cats are already knocking everything over. It didn't take
As they do.
They do. They're good at. Well, I mean, they're good at it. Uh, and yeah, Chandra Magic in the chat. We are all. They came from fans here. As a man who ran, it came from Camp Murder Lake for my bachelor party. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, that's my favorite. That's
That is it's a close second for me. It's a
that's a
close
that's
second
a
for me.
that's a yeah. We're all fans here, so that's yeah. I love it.
And I think the thing that nudges Cyclops slightly above Camp Mirror Lake for me personally is just that I have made slasher movies before,
Ah,
so that
yeah.
that itch has been scratched in my life.
I mean,
And also, well, go ahead.
no, Clash of the Titans, the old Clash of the Titans movie, not the new one. It was such a formative film for me as a kid. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I One of my earliest memories. A lot of my early memories are either in a movie theater or in front of my television.
oh
I
wow,
grew up. My family was relatively well to do till I was about 5, and then my dad lost his business, and we were dirt poor for a while after that. But the one thing that my parents always did was they maintained cable and HBO. As long as we had power in the house, we had those two things.
ah,
So I remember very very early watching, much younger than I should have, watching Clash of the Titans,
oh sure,
watching a bunch of John Carpenter on HBO.
oh yeah,
Yeah, and that was very formative for me. But one of my earliest memories is Perseus fighting Medusa,
Oh, I mean,
and just finding that so terrifying as a child. You know.
so good, so good. Medusa was scared the hell out of me. That was the Harryhausen special effects and everything like that were just formative. They're amazing. Um, let's see. One more question. Oh, okay. Here we go. We've talked a lot about games. We talked a little bit about film. What would you say is a book? Let's go with a book just for now because we haven't touched on just regular books that
Sure.
influenced your work as a game developer.
That's a good question. Um, Honestly, I would say the books that I find to be the greatest influence, like notwithstanding game books, like
Mm-hmm.
specific like game books, like
Yes.
there's stuff I've read and I could list 100 where I've read. Oh, that's a cool thing that I need to steal and reskin. Um, but like actual like inspiration to write, I would say the biggest ones for me are. If you're looking in terms of like the technical side of things, On Writing by Stephen King
Hell
is
yeah.
an incredible book that everybody should read for sure.
That's a great book.
If you're interested at all in writing, that should be like your first stop. But honestly, as I was a kid, and again, this might just be a symptom of my age, but I was really into S.E. Hinton novels.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
I honestly, I think the way S.E. Hinton created her characters and her environments, there's a lot that you can crib from about character development, about motivations, about painting an environment that is familiar in a way that is also engaging,
Mm-hmm.
and and really about like the characters in S.E. Hinton novels all have very clear motivations that are all communicated very effectively without them ever having to tell you, like without them having to like give you a mission statement.
Right.
You know what I mean? Without exposition.
Right. Without saying
Um,
anything, without being really, clunky about this is what I want.
Right, right. And I think that I mean, there are moments, there are characters and moments that have that quality to it, but those are often at the end of the book where it's kind of buttoning up what's happened before, as opposed to like them saying at the beginning, like, this is what these are my goals and my motivations, more at the end, like a recap, like, this is what I did and why, which is also cool. Because yeah, I just think studying S.E. Hinton is a good way to get a grasp on character motivations and on making your standard locations seem cool. She could describe a pool hall in a way that was engaging and interesting, even if you've been in a dozen pool halls. If you can extrapolate that out to a dungeon, you know,
You're in good shape.
you're in good shape. Yeah.
It's so funny you bring up Hinton because my wife and I were literally just talking the other day. I feel like I was one of the only people of my generation who just my school did not require the Outsiders at any point, and I never read. I need to. That's a big blind spot for me. I really need to get to that and read it.
I don't recall that. I mean, full disclosure, my academic career is spotty. I was a dyed in the wool nerd, straight laced, hush puppies, and button down shirts until I became an eighth grader, and then my life went off the rails.
Hmm.
And after 3 years as a freshman, I dropped out of high school. But
Yeah,
prior to that,
I
though,
think at that point you're
um,
like, you know what? I gave it my all. I gave it a
right.
shot.
In as much as I showed up for choir class in English one time, and that was about it. I was I was very much a school skipper. Much to my regret, I went back and got my diploma later and whatnot. But yeah, I don't recall ever being required to read a Hinton novel. I was turned on to Hinton by a English teacher in, I want to say, fourth grade.
Hmm.
Um, Oddly enough, through the book Taming the Star Runner, which is not one of her most famous books, but it's really good. It was the book, first piece of media I ever encountered, and probably the best piece of media I encountered for 20 years afterward, that had a uh, male and female lead who had a relationship that was not defined by romantic interest.
Oh, that's a
You know?
favorite. That's a
Yeah.
big deal, especially when you're younger.
Yeah, and it was well handled, and there's even a scene in the book where like they kind of hang a lantern on that, where like the male character sort of makes an advance a little bit, but it's very it's more like a curious question type of thing, and she's like no, and then the line is you know her saying no thrilled him more than any yes he'd ever had.
Oh,
The idea of like really sort of they had built this bond, and it wasn't a sibling bond, and it wasn't a lover bond, and that's almost unheard of in media. Even today, that's rare.
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. There's a reason we talk about it as much as we do because it's so common that that's the angle people take.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was very insightful and very interesting to me. And then, of course, after that, I read That Was Then, This Is Now, which at the time, I know a lot of people identify with The Outsiders, but That Was Then, This Is Now is the one that felt the most like, oh, you're writing a biography about me,
Nice.
for me. so,
Well, now I have to
um,
check that one out specifically so I can get to know you better.
well, thank you. It's a good one. The movie's not bad either. It's not a terribly accurate adaptation, but it's not bad. It's got Craig Schaefer and Emilio Estevez in it.
Good lord. Sorry.
Oh,
The cats continue to destroy our place.
you're all
Well,
good. I was leaning, and then my camera was following me around, and it gave me this weird thing. But yeah, short version is check out That Was Then, This Is Now.
that's great. All right. Well, I think that's what we got. Travis, thank you so much for joining us on Meet
Thank
and
you
Mingle.
for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Why don't you? Is there any project you're working on right now? Anything you want the people to know about, where they can find it, etc. Now is your chance.
Sure. So the big things that I want to make sure everybody knows about is that we've got uh, the Curious Cats of Mao backer kit. You can sign up right now. It has not started yet, but the registration site is open, so you can sign up now over at crowdfunding by BackerKit. I've thrown the link in chat. If you sign up, you'll get an email when the campaign goes live, so you can be one of the first people to back it. I did not get to work directly on that particular book, but I love the Monarchies of Mao. I look forward to seeing how it manifests in Onyx 20. It's going to be a good time. As far as other stuff that's kind of in the pipeline, definitely go pick up Icons of Rage. It was super fun to work on. And check out the various streams I've got going every first, third, and fifth Wednesday. I'm doing Scarred Lands on every other Thursday, starting uh, 2 weeks from 2 weeks from this past Thursday. So a week from next Thursday will be the World Below, and then biweekly on Fridays. With this coming Friday being the session one, will be They Came from the Cyclops' Cave, and all those schedules are posted weekly on the channel and also in the Monday meeting notes. So if you ever want to know what's going on with Onyx Path, the best place to check is the Monday meeting notes.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Phil Keeling. I have been your host. Please check out my podcast, Pixel Lit. It is the best podcast about the adaptation of video games to novels, and it's the best one because it's the only one. We have cornered the market, and where else are you gonna go? Toys R Us? They don't have it. They're not even there anymore. That giraffe has been gone for too long. We miss him.
Very, very sad. Very
Yes,
sad.
absolutely. You can also find my book, Juice, on Amazon or psychotoxinpress.com if you like American Psycho or Sideways or Wine or Murder. Please check it out. Fun kind of murder, not the really heavy-handed kind of murder. I think we all know there's a balance that we can all deal with. But check it out. In the meantime, thank you guys so much. I'll be back here next week, this time and channel, and we're going to be talking to Matthew Dawkins. So until then, we'll see you guys later. Bye bye.
See ya. Thanks.